Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. We are back for another match preview and prediction, and we've got a blockbuster matchup to get into. Emma Raducanu versus Karolina Muchova in the Dubai second round. I can't wait to get into this one because it's a great clash of styles. I think both play an exciting brand of tennis. I think it'll gel great. And on top of that, it's the first time that both players will meet. So there's no historical data to look at really when it comes to how this match might play out. So I'm going to be doing some calculated guesswork, right? Strategically of how I think it might play out and what might end up happening and who will come out on top in the end. Before we do get into it though, remember to that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you are listening on a podcast platform. Thank you to all our members on YouTube and also to those who contribute to the channel. It really does help us out. We are eternally grateful. Okay, so for Emma Raducanu, it has been an interesting start to the season as she won a couple of matches at the Australian Open against some decent opponents. You know, in hindsight, Alexandrova was a great win, of course. She ended up winning WTA Linz and actually beat Raducanu after the Australian Open, but she beat Alexandrova in straight sets and Samova in straight sets, and then lost to Iga Swiatek, which, look, there's no shame in that. Iga went on to make the semi-finals and had a match point against the eventual champion in Madison Keys. But since then, it's been horrible. I think it's fair to say. Now, some of it is partly down to her opponents because she's been drawn against some really tough opponents, but part of it is also just maybe a lack or dip in form anyway. So she lost to Karolina Muchova in Singapore, which I think was a big loss. On paper, if you look at the rankings, Muchova ended up beating her in 3 sets. Then in Abu Dhabi, she lost to Vondrousova, who of course is the Wimbledon champion or former Wimbledon champion, but Marketa Vondrousova has been injured for quite a while, and she came back in January, so she wasn't at, I personally don't think she was at her best level. She played a solid level. Raducanu had a lot of chances in that match, but ended up losing in straight sets. Then at the Qatar Open, she played Alexandrova, who she beat in the first round of the Australian Open, but ended up losing that in straight sets as well. So she was on a 4-match losing streak until she came up against Maria Sakkari, who she did have a 2-0 head-to-head winning record against. So went into that confident, and rightly so, because she ended up coming out on top in straight sets. For Muchova, she has had her own things to deal with, and own problems to get through, and it hasn't been really down to form but more to do with her body. So Australian Open, she did lose in the second round, but she lost to Naomi Osaka, who's playing some really good tennis, and we know how dangerous she can be on hard courts. Then in Linz, she played that tournament, made the semi-finals, lost to eventual champion Alexandrova in the semi-finals, and then so far in Dubai, she has done well, beat Lamins in the first round. What's interesting, though, is that she didn't play the Qatar Open because of an injury. And if you watched any of her WTA Linz matches, you would have seen that she was carrying a niggle. I think it was in her right leg. So, yeah, good to see her back. And I don't see any strapping. I could be wrong in her opening match against Lamins. So hopefully it means she's fully fit and raring to go, and she put in a pretty comprehensive performance against the Dutch player. So how can this match be won or lost? What do we need to really look out for when it comes to these players when they come up against each other? Well, they both like to come forward and transition to the net. That's fair to say, I think. But in different ways. So Karolina Muchova, she has a deadly slice, and her game is quite similar to a female version of Roger Federer. And I guess the most likely person that I can compare her to on the WTA tour, and she's now retired, is Ash Barty. I think it's a very similar style. And of course, I'm not saying that she is exactly the same style or she's even the same caliber of player. You know, Ash won multiple slams and Muchova hasn't won one yet. I think I'd be surprised if she ends her career not winning one, if I'm honest. That's my kind of feeling around how good she is. But we'll see, because she's extremely talented, but she's had a lot of injuries, and also there are some interesting parts to her game, and she can potentially break down the forehand. we've seen in the past as well. Can be a bit erratic. But one thing that is, I think, one of the staples in her game and something that's really effective is the backhand slice. One of the best on tour. Stays super low. She can use it in an aggressive manner, in a defensive manner. She can vary it down the line. A bit more spin, backspin, bit less, really knife through it with pace. And that's going to be interesting. I think that's actually one of the biggest things that I am intrigued about when it comes to this matchup is how is Raducanu going to deal with that knifing slice? Is it going to cause her fits, or is she going to be able to get low, really generate a lot of racket head speed to let it not bother her? But especially on the backhand side is where I'm interested potentially as well, because I feel like most players are able to deal with a slice better on their forehand side because they're able to generate more racket head speed. But on the backhand side, especially if you have a double hander, it's a bit harder to generate that. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, as I said, both players like to come forward to the net. Raducanu is more about taking the ball early and trying to utilize angles and then coming forward. For Muchova, as I said, the slice. I think she also has a really potent forehand and she's got a great drop shot as well. So that'll be interesting when it comes to this matchup. And Raducanu doesn't like the drop shot as much, but she can utilize it. So the drop shot's going to be quite a big thing, I think, because Raducanu generally is very good at chasing them down and being able to at least do something with it. But Muchova's got a really good drop shot. So I'm interested to see how Raducanu deals with that, with the variety that Muchova brings, because a lot of players, when they play against someone with that much variety, it's hard to find rhythm. One thing I will say is that I actually don't think it could be controversial, but I don't think she's necessarily a rhythm player, Raducanu. I think she's a confidence player, but rhythm is different. I think she's okay with variety, but the biggest issue for her is her serve. She hasn't been serving well enough, and that's why she's been losing a lot of matches. Look, I mean, if we look at the stats for the last match, 68% of first serves in, but only 62% of first serve points won, 56 behind the second serve, which, to be fair, is very, very impressive. But she, in my opinion, I know it's more of a common thing on the WTA tour, but I think she struggles to hold serve too often, in my opinion. I just think it's too much. She needs to be better. I think whether it means hitting her spots or that first serve percentage of 68%, maybe it goes down to 55%, but she's winning 80% of her first serve points. So maybe she needs to go for a bit more on the first serve, try and paint the lines or at least vary it up potentially. But I just feel like it's a bit samey the first serve, and it ends up then becoming predictable and the opponent's able to anticipate more on the return. For Muchova, her serve is more potent, definitely. But I'd say Raducanu is probably a better returner. Muchova is in more of the mold of the Caroline Garcia school of thought. She wants to take the ball as early as possible on the return to stepping into the baseline if needed. So she will attack the Raducanu second serve. And then from the back of the court, I think Raducanu needs to utilize angles because that's how she gets forward to the net, with angles, with some depth and change direction down the line at times as well, getting her opponent on the run. And we know that she's very good at going line early and being pinpoint and precise with that. But I think the angles are going to be key here. Muchova is such a talented player, but one area where Raducanu might be able to come out better is actually when it comes to the physicality, the speed in that she moves around the court. Her general movement, I think, is potentially better than Muchova's. If I was Raducanu, I would be looking to come to the net like she has been doing, utilizing angles, make Muchova feel awkward, and put her out of position on court, because as soon as they trade down the middle, Muchova will be the one to go first in terms of pressing on the front foot. It's going to be a real battle in momentum, and mainly actually a real battle in who will be able to dictate and have the controlling power in the rallies. And that's where I think it's going to be won or lost, to be honest. In terms of my prediction, I'm going to go with a pretty bold one. I'm going to go with Raducanu in 3 sets, which I think is pretty bold because Muchova is playing some great tennis. Let me know in the comment section below what you think and why. But yeah, I just think that maybe Raducanu, if she's able to be solid enough against Muchova, the errors might start to flow from the Czech side, and Raducanu just needs to make sure that she's the one dictating the majority of the time rather than Muchova. And if so, neither player, to be fair, defends too well, but I would argue that Raducanu defends a bit better than Muchova. Thank you very much, guys. Stay safe for a while, and we'll see you in the next video.